Well, I can't let it be silent, so I'll have one. I'd like to request introduction of RS 1666. This is a repeal of the 2006 threshold on the commercial and industrial machinery and equipment exemption.
666.
Plenty of comments. The limitation, right, currently in statute is we have a exemption on equipment that is after 2006. Anything that is older than 2006 does not have an exemption, and I think that's a little unfair and impartial, so I'm just removing the 2006 date from that, so it does no longer applies to the older equipment as well. But any questions, committee? Any objection? Seeing none, the request is approved. Okay, committee, we do have some minutes that you should have received on March 4th, February 26th. Please review those, and we will take action on those tomorrow. We have 3 hearings for today, and the first of those is House Bill 2154, and I turn to the reviser for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2154 would discontinue the excise tax that is currently imposed on the rental or lease of vehicles, who are essentially any rental vehicles which are for a period of less than 28 days. Commencing July 1, 2025, the 3.5% excise tax that's currently levied on the gross receipts would no longer be imposed. As is in current law, motor rental or lease vehicles owned by a car rental company are subject to the 3.5% excise tax. However, these vehicles are then correspondingly exempt under the motor vehicle property taxes. So they pay the excise, or when they rented, the person renting pays the excise tax, but these vehicles are exempt from having to pay property taxes. Under this bill, the exemption for rental or lease motor vehicles owned by a car rental company and subject to the excise tax would be removed. And therefore, commencing on July 1 of 2025, vehicles would be subject to property tax who are owned by car rental companies. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. We'll now turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. The fiscal impact of this bill would be at the local level with the discontinuation of the vehicle rental excise tax that is currently distributed to the counties based upon the location of the rental or lease transaction, and now will be collected as property tax wherever the car rental companies choose to register those vehicles. Because of that choice of where they can register those vehicles, we're not able to come up with an estimate at this point in time. We can tell you the number of vehicles in the rental fleet system, which is around 15,000, and we can tell you the amount of vehicle rental excise tax that will be discontinued. The amount that was collected in calendar year 23 was around $6.5 million.
Thank you, Kathleen. Committee, any questions? Representative Sanders.
This may be a question for the reviser, but is there any requirement that they register the vehicles in Kansas?
No, there is no requirement for them to register them in Kansas. If they have a bona fide place of business in Kansas, they can choose to register them there.
They can also choose to register them in Missouri or wherever.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Kathleen. We'll now open up our proponent section testimony, and I believe we have Ryan Cagney via WebEx. Are you there, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
All right, we've got you loud and clear. Please continue.
Awesome. Let me pull up my testimony real quick. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Ryan Cagney, and I'm a senior government relations manager for Turo, a peer-to-peer car network, a peer-to-peer car sharing company. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'd like to reemphasize Turo's commitment both to the state of Kansas and this committee to work on legislation in support of HB 2154. We have hundreds of hosts and thousands of guests across Kansas placing their vehicles on the platform and assist them in generating extra revenue with their vehicles when they're not using them. In 1991, the legislature passed SB 14, which created a tax exchange where rental car companies would no longer be required to pay the property tax in direct exchange for the creation of a rental car excise tax on rental receipts. The intent of the legislation was to recover the loss of the new property tax exemption through imposing new excise tax. However, today that is not the case. According to the Kansas Department of Revenue, the excise tax generates roughly $6.5 million annually, while rental car special tax break and property tax exemption is estimated at a loss of $15 million annually to the local governments in the state of Kansas. HB 2154 will create a fair and level playing field by eliminating the excise tax placed on those renting vehicles in Kansas, while reinstating the property tax on rental vehicles purchased and operated here in Kansas. The excise tax currently applied to rental car transactions is paid by rental customers and not by a rental company. Eliminating the excise tax would be a tax cuts for Kansas residents and the visitors to Kansas renting their vehicles. Since 1981, Kansas has been part of the International Registration Plan, or the IRP, which is a multi-state jurisdictional agreement regarding the registration of vehicles used in interstate commerce, such as trucks and rental cars. It is my understanding that the Kansas IRP statute requires and is as adopted to follow multi-jurisdictional agreements which allow rental cars to be registered both in and out of the state at a proportional amount based on the percentage of revenue that comes from each state and require registration and property taxes to be paid prior to registering those vehicles. To be clear, this legislation would not set a new precedent, but would align with the states of North Dakota, Georgia, Hawaii, Oregon, where rental car companies are paying a property tax and a tax on the purchase of their vehicles. Furthermore, rental car companies are already required to pay property taxes like the ones we're addressing today in 13 other states, to include Arizona, Arkansas, Indiana, and Missouri. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of Turo's community here in Kansas, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? Representative Kessler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan, thank you for being here today. I do kind of have a question here, talking about paying property tax versus this excise tax. I assume we're doing the excise tax because cars aren't registered in Kansas. I would assume that was kind of the premise for starting this tax. Other than your company and your model, how does that change anywhere else? Because I think we still have these rental car companies that are, the vast majority of them are registered outside of Kansas. Therefore, we're not collecting anything. I mean, did I miss that part in here?
My understanding is prior to the implementation of this law, there was actually a requirement for them to have a proportional number of their vehicles registered in Kansas, and they were paying property taxes, and they simply proposed a swap with SB 14, although that was in 1991, so I may be incorrect on that, but that is my understanding of the previous allocation of the law. There's also the ability to use the IRP to compel them to register their vehicles here in Kansas in a proportional amount, as I said, to their fleet profits nationally. For instance, if they make $100 million nationally and $1 million is made in Kansas, they would have to register 1% of their vehicles in Kansas.
All right, Representative Corbett?
Thank you, Chairman. The question I have, if I would put my truck on your platform, what would that do to my insurance rates or my premium?
It would depend entirely on who your insurance provider is. In my understanding, and I have several friends that actually have vehicles on Turo, their personal liability rates haven't changed, although I'm not here to be an insurance salesman or a broker. Generally, there are certain insurers that will tell you that we do not want you to have the insurance on the vehicle. If you're running it through Turo, most of them are perfectly okay with it, and in fact worked with us on the NCOIL model, which is the National Council of Insurance Legislators model legislation we passed in a number of states. I believe that we're about 30, 35 right now. The insurance that actually covers your vehicle while it's on the platform is actually our insurance policy, as well as the driver's insurance policy, not the owner's.
Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, Ryan, thank you again for your testimony.
Of course, thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to appear as an proponent? Okay, seeing none, we will turn to the opponent testimony and welcome first to committee Sean Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, members of the committee, I appreciate it. Also appreciate you rescheduling this. We missed out on the first one of these because of a snow day, so it is a little bit like Groundhog Day in March for us. This is the third time we've had a hearing on this bill. So for all but 4 or 5 of you who have heard this 2 or 3 times, I apologize. You're going to get a little bit of a rerun. But for a few of you, I think this will be new information, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. First off, the representative from Saline County, I think, hit it on the head earlier. We actually did a post audit on this in 1984. I use the term we a little bit liberal. I was not here at that point in time. But what we discovered at that time, quite frankly, was that rental cars were not choosing to register most of their vehicles within the state of Kansas. They were sort of chasing low property tax states. They were registering a lot of cars in one state and not in Kansas because Kansas had higher property taxes. At that time, they asked the Department of Revenue, okay, so how do we fix this? And the Department of Revenue, the very back of the report in their response letter, said we can fix it, but we'll have to hire enough staff that it will cost us more to chase down the lost revenue than we will make in lost revenue. So we don't think it's really probably in the financial best interest, but we'll leave that up to the legislature. Fast forward 6 or 7 years, 1991, many of us were not in this room. Perhaps some of us were. And what we decided to do at that point in time was, rather than try to chase registrations from place to place, because every one of us before has flown into DFW and rented a car that had Florida plates, right? How do we know where these cars go? How do we keep track of them? We said, you know what, the easiest thing to do is we will charge an excise tax in lieu of property tax. That excise tax will be collected at the point of sale, will be remitted back to the county where that rental takes place. It's easier for us to audit because it's being collected right in with the sales tax, everything else, and the state will remit that back to the locals, and so that way the locals are made whole. So that is where we got this system in place right now. I just heard a few numbers there that I'm a little bit confused by, but we'll take a shot at it. Department of Revenue estimates that we have 15,000 rental cars. Last year in the fiscal note for this bill before this committee, they estimated that Enterprise had the vast majority of those. So in looking into this, we believe that some of our long-term fleet rentals are probably also included in that number. And our long-term fleet rentals are 2 to 3 year rentals, so we do in fact pay personal property tax on them. This excise tax is limited to rentals of 28 days or less, so like your vacation cars. So I believe that if you were to take a look at this, even if it's the 15,000 car level, we just heard that the state of Kansas is losing out on $15 million. We know we're collecting 6.5, so I assume that means $21.5 million. That would be an average personal tax on your vehicle of $1,433 per car. I live in Shawnee County. I drive a relatively new but not super fancy car. My car is under $500 in personal property tax. If we assume, so the 1433 is if if the 15 million that we're losing was the total amount. If the 6.5 million's on there, that's more like 2150 per car. So I'm not sure that the numbers quite bear this out. I did want to talk just a little bit about the IRP. This is something that we heard in committee last year as well. And to kind of give you a quick overview on IRP without trying to take you too far down the rabbit hole, most of us have driven by on I-70 or 35. We've passed a truck. It had Texas plates on it, but as you moved up, you saw a sticker that said Indiana. You saw a sticker that said Georgia. You saw a sticker that said a portion to Kentucky. The IRP in the state of Kansas is a long-haul heavy trucking industry association. So if you are driving from Sacramento to Atlanta, back and forth, if you're more fun, maybe you're running beer from Atlanta to Texarkana, as a movie did once upon a time, you have to keep track of where that vehicle goes, and you have to report logs, mile logs, and then they have to apportion out your travel so that they know how to do your taxes state to state, county to county across those. We don't use the IRP for rental vehicles. If we did, when you rented a car in Kansas City or in Topeka, they would say, here's your logbook. We need you to track everywhere you go, the route you took, and how many miles you drove so that we know how to do your taxes. Most of us, I don't think any of us, have probably ever been handed a logbook with our rental car. So we don't use IRP for rental cars in the state of Kansas. That question was asked directly of the Department of Revenue last year. They confirmed that, but I welcome the opportunity for you to have them confirm that with them again. I do believe that this bill is and continues to be a solution in search of a problem. I know last time I got a question that I thought was a really good one that said, well, if it was 3.5% in 1991, should we increase the percentage now for inflation? The beauty of picking a 3.5% excise tax and letting it carry forward, I can't tell you what a rental car ran in 1991. I'm going to guess $15, $18 a day. Now they're up much more than that, $45, $50 a day. So the inflationary factor is built into that daily rental price. So that 3.5% today is 3.5% of a significantly higher rental fee in 2025 than it was in 1991. So that's where I do believe that we keep up with inflation. I do believe if you pass this bill, that you will, number one, you will eliminate the excise tax. It will put personal property tax back on. It will become a bit of a paperwork nightmare for the companies trying to keep up with these cars, where they're used more often. But more so than anything else, it will perhaps permit people or incentivize people to register cars out of the state of Kansas in places where there is a lower property tax rate. And we may see a significant overall loss of revenue, not a gain in revenue for the state of Kansas. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come here today and talk to you a little bit about it. My apologies for those of you who have had to listen to me multiple times do this. I am more than happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take questions. Committee, any questions? Representative Corbett, yes.
I kind of agree with you. The rental business will be gone in this state if we go with the property tax. I think they'll just set on the borders and rent your cars there, because it should greatly increase your rental fee, I would think, over a property tax, over an excise tax. I don't know that, but I think it would. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Corbett, I tend to agree a little bit. I think, I'm not speaking on behalf of any other companies, right? But I'm going to go back to 1984. It wasn't that rental car desks didn't exist in Topeka at the time. It's that simply they registered the car in the lowest cost state they could find. And when you went to Topeka, Kansas to rent a car, all you saw was plates from another state. And they paid taxes in that state, not in the state of Kansas. So we felt in 1991, if you go back and look at the literature, that the best and easiest way to make sure that the local jurisdictions got that was to implement a local excise tax in lieu of property tax. And I think the system has by and large worked very well.
Mr. Miller, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your numbers, because you have in your testimony, you've got roughly a 6,000 car fleet. And is that all, that's the 6,000, you referenced like long-term rentals, then the short-term, is that 6,000 the short-term?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The number I think is probably a little bit higher than 6,000, but it's kind of a bounce around number a little bit. What we try to do is we try to keep a proportional registration in Kansas to our daily fleet within Kansas. So even though that car that we register with Kansas plates may tomorrow go to Oklahoma City, Dallas, Mississippi, and move around, if our average Kansas fleet is 6,200 cars, we try to make sure that we have 6,200 cars in our fleet with Kansas plates, wherever that car happens to be currently located. We believe we have probably about half that many as well on top of that are our long-term fleet. That gets you more up around the 10,000-ish range, maybe just a little slight of that. And I think those numbers are probably also included in the Department of Revenue's 15,056 cars they talk about. But that would not be a part of a fiscal note based on this bill, because those long-term fleet cars are in fact paying property taxes. So if I'm leasing a car for more than 28 days, and this happens all the time, we'll have a home health company in rural Kansas that serves 2 or 3 counties. They will, rather than buy a vehicle, they will do a 3-year lease from Enterprise Fleet Management, and they pay personal property tax on that. Or if they're a nonprofit, they apply through BOTA for an exemption to get that personal property tax waived because they're an exempt entity. But those cars are not subject to this excise tax, and it's the excise tax in the statute that actually exempts you from personal property tax. I did look through the bill a little bit. I was a little nervous I was missing something, because the bill is 6 pages longer this year than it was 2 years ago. But that's just because we've gone from Quad O in exemptions to Quad W in exemptions. We've added 6 pages to the statute, so.
Wonderful sales tax exemptions, yes. Committee, any further questions? See none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else wishing to appear before the committee as an opponent? Any neutral testimony on House Bill 2154? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 2154 and turn to House Bill 2387. And I'll turn to the reviser for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2387 would extend the number of years that the tax credit for contributions to the Friends of Cedar Crest Association would be in effect. Under current law, the credit is slated to expire starting in the 2026 tax year. The bill would extend the tax credit for an additional 10 years or through the 2035 tax year. With that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Pretty clear cut on this one. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. This time we'll turn to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the Department of Revenue is estimating that House Bill 2387 would decrease state general fund revenues by $350,000 in fiscal year 27 and in future fiscal years.
Kathleen, do we have any, were these credits utilized to the full extent in the last few years that they've been eligible? Do you have any information on that?
As far as the amount of $350,000, no, they did not reach that cap of credits that were issued. It's more or less around probably $50,000 to $100,000 right now.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kathleen. I'd like to now open up our proponent section testimony and welcome first to committee, Jessica Lucas.
Hi, committee. Jessica Lucas. I have my Watkins Public Strategies badge on, but I am here today in my capacity as president of the Friends of Cedar Crest Association. Some of you are not new to me being in this committee talking about the Friends of Cedar Crest, but I know there are some new faces, so I want to just give a quick overview. The Friends of Cedar Crest Association is common in states to have an association that helps support the governor's residents. And so we receive donor dollars that we're able to then use for the benefit of the home. The state takes care of the maintenance of the home, the plumbing, the nuts and bolts, but the Friends of Cedar Crest Association manages the furnishings and interior of it. A few years ago, we received this tax credit and are asking today for this extension and really hopeful we can move this through this session. When I was in Representative Smith's office and we were talking about Cedar Crest, we realized that it does expire this year, which means that if we come back next year, we don't have the benefit of letting our donors know at the end of this year that they can contribute to the organization, because I can't guarantee that the tax credit will be available in future years. So that's why we are here. When we receive this tax credit, and this is not an intentional mistake on my part, we were part of a bill that gave the same tax credit to the Eisenhower Foundation. They're here today to testify. We fully support their inclusion in this bill. So I want you to know that and hope that not only are you extending this for us, but that you're also doing that for them. As Kathleen noted, we have not yet cleared $100,000 in annual donations, but we were very close this last tax year to doing that. So ultimately what that means is that for you, it was almost a $50,000 contribution. So we had $93,000 in donations that were eligible. One of the things that our board did is we only make the tax credit eligible to anyone that gives $1,000 or more. That's partly just because we are a volunteer board with no paid staff, and so managing tax credits for folks under $1,000 becomes a bureaucratic and administrative challenge. And also, we wanted to make sure that we were really rewarding people who were giving at a higher level. So certainly appreciate that. The last thing that I would say is we think about Cedar Crest. And another bill before you is House Bill 2388. This is also something I've testified in here about, and that's sales tax exemption. So when we make purchases for anything and we use these donor dollars, our donor dollars are diluted because we do not receive an exemption. So everything that is purchased from Friends of Cedar Crest Association for the benefit of the state's residents, we dilute our donor dollars because we have to pay sales tax on those. So I will remain a champion for that legislation moving through and appreciate the help that this body has given in past years. And one of these days we'll be successful. So these two items are very important today here, obviously, for the extension of the tax credit and support adding the Eisenhower Foundation as well. And I know they're going to testify too. Questions?
Thank you, Jessica. Committee questions. Representative Helgerson.
What's the balance of the account?
The Friends of Cedar Crest Association has over $200,000 in our account. We are not, that's a long way. When I joined the board, we had about $10,000. So we have had success in fundraising, hope to continue to do that. We certainly have needs at the home and are going to have to make some updates, and we'll be doing more aggressive fundraising. But we are over $200,000. We just had our Kansas Day event in January, which is our primary fundraiser. So we may be closer to 225 or so, but over 200.
So you have 200, 225. What's the budget for this year that you're going to spend?
Our board makes those decisions in collaboration with the resident of the home. You know, at this point, we do not have a budget outlined of we know what the needs are, and it's really going to be a matter of timing when we make those expenditures. Right now, there's some rugs that are probably a priority. But the other piece that comes into play, the home has not received a major renovation since 2000. And so it's a matter of, are you going to do it all at once, or do you do some? And as a board, we're having those discussions and trying to figure out what's the best path forward and make sure we're not spending money twice.
Okay, 225,000 is what you have. You don't have a budget for next year. We have a new governor coming in. Previously, it seems like, and I'd have to go back, was it $500,000, $250,000 out of the state general fund or ARPA funds that we put in previously in order to upgrade some of the things?
I appreciate that question. I think what you're referencing is the $500,000 that the state has at the treasurer's office right now. They have had that for 2 years. They'll have it for another year. That is intended as an endowment. So we will never spend that $500,000. Treasurer Johnson is managing those funds now. We're very pleased about that and encouraged by what that means. Had the state invested in an endowment in 2000 when they put in $2.2 million of public funding next to $2.2 million in private funding, it probably wouldn't even matter that we didn't have a sales tax exemption because we would have had those resources. So those dollars sit in an endowment account, and the stipulation from the legislature was that they would have to sit there for at least 3 years before we could spend any investment income. That's best practices anyway in foundation world, but those have been there for 2 years.
Okay, you have me confused, but that's all right. It would be helpful if you could have the board list your budget, but also how much you expect to spend this year and next year, and other revenue sources like the endowment. That would be helpful for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Meredith Schleichter. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today. I'm Meredith Schleichter, and I'm the Executive Director of the Eisenhower Foundation, and we are the nonprofit support organization of the Presidential Library and Museum. So we were created 80 years ago formed as to create a memorial to General Eisenhower. The Boyhood Home was opened by the foundation in 1947, and we opened the museum in 1954. And then we raised public and private dollars to build the library, which opened in 1962. And so today there are 5 buildings that comprise the 22-acre campus. So in addition to providing private sector support to the campus itself, we offer Ike Education, which offers free programs for kindergarten through 12th grade students. So I'm here in testimony in support of extending the tax credits set to expire in 2025. Specifically, I'm requesting that the bill be amended to include the Eisenhower Foundation. Since their inception in 2021, these tax credits have been instrumental in allowing the Eisenhower Foundation to partner with the private sector, generating $875,500 in donations that benefit Kansas students. These tax credits have a twofold impact. They've encouraged new donors to support our mission while also enabling existing donors to augment their annual contributions. And as a result, we've expanded our reach and strengthened our ability to provide valuable educational programming. Through these tax credits, we've served 39,500 students in K-12 across Kansas, offering crucial access to Ike Education programs that teach civic education and history through the lens of Dwight D. Eisenhower's leadership, character, and service. Each of these programs meets or exceeds state and national learning standards, ensuring that students have the opportunity to receive high-quality educational experiences that prepare them for engaged citizenship. Additionally, recent reductions in federal funding have resulted in the loss of 2 federal employees who serve the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. And so this will place additional importance on the foundation and our volunteer pool, as well as our efforts as we continue to educate students. So extending the tax credits through 2036 will allow us to continue this important work, providing students with a deeper understanding of history, civic engagement, and leadership, while fostering private sector support for education in Kansas. We urge the committee to support this extension so that we can sustain and expand these critical opportunities for Kansas students. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, any questions? Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know how much annually, how much of the credits get used each year?
Sure. So in our particular case for the foundation, we were issued up a maximum of 350,000 credits per year for the past 5 years. And as I mentioned, we have through 2024, we've been able to generate 875,000 in credits. So if you figure half of that, that's only about half of the 350,000 in credits per year.
So you're saying average around 175,000 a year?
In credits, yes.
Yes, credits.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Forgive me for not knowing, but does the state own this facility, or who owns this facility?
So the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum is a federal campus, and it is administered by the National Archives and Records Administration based in Washington, D.C. And so the private public sector comes in where federal tax dollars do a fantastic job of helping to provide the archival staff, 24-hour, 7 days a week security staff, as well as curatorial staff and grounds maintenance. And then that's the extent of the federal partnership. And then it's up to the private Eisenhower Foundation to support any sort of programming, educational programming, and exhibits that occur within the museums. So, for example, in 2019, the Eisenhower Foundation completely renovated all of the museum exhibits, and we raised about $12 million in private funding to be able to do that.
One more. Thank you. How about, how much do you get every year from the federal government? Do you have any idea?
So the Eisenhower Foundation, as I mentioned, we're the 501c3. So less than, right now, less than 3% of our budget comes from any government funding. Now that being said, for our operations. Now that being said, many of you will recall that last year, the Eisenhower Foundation received a $5 million gift from the state of Kansas, and it's ARPA funding that we are required to raise money, a match, 2-to-1. So we have to raise $10 million to get that $5 million, and that specific $5 million pool of funds from the state of Kansas goes towards our education center, which we are in the process of raising money to break ground.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you.
That's all I have showing as a proponent for House Bill 2387. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent? Seeing none, any neutral or opposing testimony? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2387 and turn our attention to House Bill 2390. And I'll turn to the reviser for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2390 would provide countywide retailers sales tax authority for Jackson County. Under the bill, Jackson County will have the authority to submit a proposition to the electors to impose a countywide retailer sales tax, an amount of 0.25%, and pledge to the revenue received therefrom for the purpose of supporting hospital services in the county. The tax would expire after 10 years, and any revenue generated from the imposition of this tax would be retained by the county and expended only for the purposes for which the revenue was pledged. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. Fiscal note on this is similar to all these other tax authorities. Unless anybody has any questions, we'll pass on over the fiscal note. So we will move to proponent testimony and welcome first to committee, Carrie Lutz. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Taxation Committee, for the opportunity today to provide testimony in support of House Bill 2390. My name is Carrie Lutz, and I'm the CEO of Holton Community Hospital. Holton is about 32 miles directly north of the state capitol on Highway 75 in Jackson County. We have just over 13,000 residents within the county, and I'm here today to request your support to allow the citizens of Jackson County to vote on a sales tax at 0.25% that would support our community hospital. With me today, I have two dedicated volunteer board members, Marilyn Watkins and Mark Ashelman. You'll hear from Mark in just a minute. Holton Community Hospital's mission is to provide excellence, compassion, and professionalism for healthcare, in healthcare for a healthier community. As a rural healthcare provider, we know that we're taking care of our friends, our family, and our neighbors. We know that a thriving rural community needs thriving schools, great places to worship, and a thriving quality healthcare institution. As I was preparing my testimony today, I asked ChatGPT, what does it mean to be reimbursed as a critical access hospital? Here's what I found. Critical access hospitals are reimbursed by the government through a special program to help them stay open. Instead of getting paid based upon the usual rates by Medicare, critical access hospitals are reimbursed more generously to cover the higher cost of running a small rural hospital. So this system ensures that critical access hospitals can afford to provide services even though they may have fewer patients and higher operating costs than a larger hospital. The government's payment is meant to help them stay financially stable while still offering necessary health care to their communities. In short, critical access hospitals get paid in a way that helps them stay open, keeps them serving people, even though they're in rural areas with fewer people. I think that ChatGPT is aligned where many people think critical access hospitals are. The definition describes the intent and the design behind critical access hospitals, but that's not today's reality. Many of the issues at the federal level, like our payer mix, and the impact of the Medicare Advantage plans have impacted our reimbursement. Today, we're up to about 30% of payer mix of Medicare Advantage plans. Those plans deny services, and they do not pay as the traditional Medicare rates, Medicare payment plans do. Changes have also been implemented by limits on cost and what is an allowable cost by Medicare. For example, our rural health clinics, we have 3, one in Hoyt, Wetmore, and Holton. They have caps on what the cost will be or allowed to be reimbursed. To have a CRNA provide anesthesia services, those are capped. And that, again, that's not what the cost is to cover, it's what Medicare assumes is allowed. Other significant issues that are not at the federal level include our 340B programs and being paid to care for Medicaid patients. $0 come from the federal level to support from the state, or from the local level to support the 340B program, and yet it's been cut in half. Patients used to be able to choose which pharmacy they want to go to in our town of Holton that has 2 pharmacies. Now we have to choose which one to go to. We used to be able to fund, and we continue to fund, but we may have to choose differently, our senior group therapy and our behavioral health within our primary care areas, because previously those were funded by our 340B programs. Due to these cutbacks, we are one of the faces that you see when you hear reports that Kansas hospitals are struggling financially. This is true, and it's true for our organization. It's incredibly difficult to ask for assistance from our community. Knowing that any increase in taxation is an unpopular decision and always sensitive. However, we're committed to providing that quality care to our neighbors, our friends, and our families. That's our mission and our responsibility. We believe that Jackson County residents deserve the best in health care, and this tax support would help us continue to fulfill that. Access to timely and appropriate care is not only vital for the health of our residents, but also for our overall economic health of our community. For the last several years, our hospital has averaged over 40,000 outpatient visits, ranging from imaging to laboratory services to rehabilitation care and specialty care in our clinics. Additionally, in our emergency department alone this last year, we saw close to 4,000 patients. We performed over 200 EKGs. Those are essential to diagnose time-sensitive diagnoses like heart attacks. These services that our community needs are vital that we continue to provide. We're constantly tailoring our services to make sure we're providing what our community needs. In our most recent community health needs assessment, mental health, chronic disease management, substance use disorders, and obesity were among the top most pressing concerns. These are not often high profitability services, but they're services that are needed in our community. Even with the recent grant funding and USDA loan support for our expansion, we're finding it increasingly difficult to continue to offer these critical services. Our board has made some tough decisions, and they'll continue to make tough decisions. We recently closed our home health and hospice services and are in the process of selling them to another agency. This proposed sales tax would help us continue our mission and ensure that Jackson County residents have access to health care that they need. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and I respectfully ask for you to support allowing the citizens of Jackson County the opportunity to vote on this important issue.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carrie, thank you for your work. I can tell you love your community and your hospital. When I hear 0.25%, it almost seems like nothing to me. I mean, that's very little. How much do you think you'll gain from this?
Working with the Jackson County Commissioners, they estimate between 300 and 400,000 annually.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And do you know what the current countywide rate is in Jackson County?
8.65%.
Okay, that's the combined.
Combined,
State, okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony. Next, we'd like to welcome Mark Ashelman. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Ashelman. I'm here representing the Holton Community Hospital. I've been fortunate to be on the board at Holton since 2018. I'm also on the foundation board and the patient advisory committee there. Personally, since 1994, I've owned and operated Ashelman Construction, where we build quality custom homes in Shawnee County and Jackson County and throughout. So first off, I will have to express that it's an honor to be here. This is a lot different than what I do on a daily basis, so if I seem nervous, it's probably because I am. But I have to tell you that I see, Mr. Chairman, you and your committee as what I consider game changers. You're trying to make our tomorrow better than it is today, so for that I thank you. And so as you look at the situation we're in, you know, when I was just started out in construction, I made $6 an hour. Today, if I hire someone, I have to be right around $20 an hour to start. Prices have increased. I've had to adjust my business because of that and make adjustments. If I didn't do that, I would be out of business. And so being on the board at the Holton Hospital, I've learned a lot. And one thing is how the finances work. See, the Holton Community Hospital has similar issues that I have with my business. Prices are increasing. The cost of business is going up. And so it all boils back to reimbursements. And so often what is the expenditures are, the reimbursements aren't as much to cover that, creating a financial gap. And because of that financial shortfall, you see hospitals in our communities like Sabetha and Seneca, Marysville, Onega, Wamego. All these hospitals get public financial support. The Holton Community Hospital does not get that at all at this point. And so I have to be honest with you, I am not a fan of raising taxes or creating taxes. It makes it hard for the business owner and hard for the consumer. But I will say, knowing what I know, how hospitals ran, myself as a business owner and a consumer, I would support this bill 100%. Why? Because I know the issues and the struggles that our Holton Community Hospital and all hospitals go through. As an example, you know, there's such a big need that we have in the importance of our hospital. Last year alone, over 3,800 people visited the emergency room at the Holton Community Hospital needing critical care. The Holton Community Hospital also is a major economic boost to us. 203 people work there. That's a lot of people in a small community. In the past few years, the cost of doing business has gone up around 33%. So if you look at that and look at all the situations we're in, one of the reasons that cost has gone up actually is because we're trying to compete with employees from larger hospitals, okay? The wages, okay? So we're trying to compete with Topeka and Kansas City and Lawrence hospitals. And so we are faced with, you know, making some tough decisions, as our CEO mentioned. So because of those reasons I mentioned today, that's why I'm here today asking for your support for House Bill 2390 to help the Holton Community Hospital. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and for being nervous, you did a fantastic job, so good job. Committee, any questions? Yes, Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir. This may be for you or for Ms. Lutz. I may have missed it, but is the hospital critical access hospital, or have you considered that, or rural emergency hospital? Just curious about that. Thank you.
We are a critical access hospital, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have missed it too. There's a lot of information out here, but did you give me, did one of you give us a amount of uncompensated care in a year that you're seeing? Uncompensated care?
I'm sorry, compensated care?
Maybe I'm not saying it right. Uninsured. Uninsured people, what's your cost? What are you losing in uncompensated?
Our bad debt is about 3.9% of our total gross, which is around 40 million, so 3.9% of that.
So I don't do math.
I don't have my phone on me.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't know how to compare that. I kind of know how to compare dollars between hospitals, but I don't know how to compare the percent. But I think that is what we have to look at, and Medicaid expansion might help a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none. Question, Representative Awerkamp.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Carrie. Mark, just more of an addition. I think they've worked for quite some time over the last year, maybe longer, with the Jackson County Commission and probably other governing bodies to kind of look at different options, and this is kind of the result. So there's been a tremendous amount of work put into leading up to this bill request. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again here, the underlying issue of this bill, this is just a comment, but the underlying issue with this bill is the legislature has to give counties taxing authority for them to put the issue on a ballot and have their own taxpayers vote on this. I know we've talked about it in this body many times, and I think it's time we looked at passing something that doesn't have this requirement. That's my opinion. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you again. And again, you did a great job testifying. That was excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some written testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear before the committee as a proponent? Okay, seeing none, is there any neutral or opposing? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2390. Committee, I don't usually do this, but I'll leave it to the will of the body. With the short time that we have, I would consider going ahead and working House Bill 2390 at this time, unless there is objection. Seeing none, is there any discussion on House Bill 2390? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a friendly reminder that we should allow the locals to decide this on their own. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are working on a bill as we speak, so. Representative Awerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You need a motion?
Yes, I'd accept a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we pass out House Bill 2390 favorably.
Okay, further discussion, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if this could not be put on the consent calendar?
It could be if that was.
Did you say that? I'm sorry, I was talking to another representative. Sorry.
Did you want that on the consent calendar? Was that your motion?
Mr. Chairman, if there is no objection, yes, please.
Okay. So we have a motion by Representative Awerkamp and a second by Representative Long. Further discussion, committee? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, before you get packed up, committee, that does conclude our business for the day. I want to give everyone kind of a heads up on what the week looks like. You might pull out a pen and paper if you've got it, or your laptop, and keep track of some numbers here. Some of these bills we haven't heard yet. They will be coming in the next few days, but I want to give the committee an idea of what we might see coming across to work. And I'll try to do these in order. Senate Bill 10, Senate Bill 33, Senate Bill 51, Senate Bill 52, Senate Bill 117, Senate Bill 227, Senate Bill 269, House Bill 2005, House Bill 2013, House Bill 2097, House Bill 2154, House Bill 2318, House Bill 2336, House Bill 2387, and we just took care of House Bill 2390, so that one doesn't need to be on the list. But that's what I intend to try to take action on between now and next, is it Tuesday? Is that our last day in committee? Like I said, some of those we still have hearings yet to have on, but just want to make the committee aware if you have any amendments or anything you want to prepare on those bills, or if there's other bills that you want to take some look at, please let me know, and we'll see what we can get fit in. So with that, Henry, did you want to make an announcement? Did you want to make an announcement on you're done? Okay. Okay. All right, with that, committee, we are adjourned.